Most of what we call American music comes from Black fieldwork music or Black spiritual music. We can even say Black war music and oral traditions that we can trace back to, to Africa and specifically to West Africa. And folk music is also music of hope, perseverance, and much like folk music, folk art is also a commentary on Black lives and everyday dealings. Some are cautionary tales, so listen and look closely. And others are simply stating one's feelings about life's many colorful events. We find the call and response of the hollers of the field workers echoed in the symmetrical aspects of the art and the music we have chosen to share with you today. And without speaking too much, because we will have 10 pieces to discuss, I think 9 now, 9 pieces to discuss, I will ask Dimitri and Lucarissa to take it away with this first piece.
Lucarissa, do you want to kick this one off for us?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were going to listen to some music first, but okay.
Oh, that's
oh, yeah,
right.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, I was just looking.
Keep us in our A game.
All right. So here's the music for this piece.
Wake up, little sparrow. Don't make your home out in the snow. Don't make your home out in the snow.
So
Wow.
I chose that song because one very obvious reason. The artist's name is Simon Sparrow, and that kind of clicked. I don't know if it was subconsciously, but also the Ella Jenkins is kind of the queen of children's music, but also a carrier of this history of folk music, and she passes it along to the new generation, and she sings folk songs, and you can listen to them, and when you listen to them you realize actually they're not children's music so much as you can take lessons as adults from that music. So that's why I chose the song. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this
Also, it reminded me of bird seeds. For some reason.
And it's also Drop Dead Gorgeous. It's a beautiful song.
It is.
right.
It is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought it was a perfect pairing. So this piece is just so very interesting. It's multi-layered. He uses a lot of the glitter kind of like as the base, and then he takes found objects and places them in there. Dimitri brought to my attention that the outer part of it kind of looks like an opan, which is a divination tool from West Africa. And I was just like, then I became totally fascinated by that piece of information. Like, yes, actually it does. And what's interesting about it is that, when you look at it in its totality, I mean, there's just so much to see. And then every time you look at it, again, you see something different. You focus on something totally different. And so, first, I thank you. My eye first went to the yellow flower, and it's like, so, what is that about? And as I began to read about his work and his process, so he believed that he was called by God to create these pieces. And he said that what he would do is that he would just let his mind go blank so that the spirit could enter. And then he said, he described that process as being sweeter than anything on earth. He feels like he's climbing. And he said he didn't paint representative portraits, but that in using the found objects, he created images of people's souls. And I was just fascinated by that. He said he felt like he had God's inner eyes, so that he could see much more than the physical being. He was literally seeing their souls, and as he saw that, that is how he would create these pieces. So of course, for me, that brought up a lot of questions like, so in this particular piece, there's lots of chains. Well, what do those chains mean? Does it mean that someone's chained down? Does it mean that their mind is chained? When I saw the flower, what does that mean in terms of someone's soul? And so, I mean, I didn't have like definitive answers for that, but it just created a curiosity about this piece and what it meant in terms of someone's soul.
Yeah, I think also just, I like to get into people's narratives. And so today, oh, I thought you were putting his bio in there, but I have to go into the bio of this man, and just realizing, like, even with my own family members, when you get before pretty much the 1920s, the histories, the stories of African Americans are very fuzzy. Our birth dates of birth were not recorded. Oftentimes, we weren't born into hospitals, and so a lot of times the story shifts as a based on oral histories. So Simon Sparrow was born sometime between 1914 and 1925. It's unsure as to when he was born, and he was either born in, was it Philadelphia, or he was either born in Pennsylvania, or he was born in West Africa. And where in West Africa, no one knows. Right. And so I'm also just like really struck that he was born of, or reportedly born to, an African father. Which country in West Africa, we don't know, and a Cherokee mother. How a Cherokee mother ended up in West Africa, and then they moved back to the United States, where he was raised on a Cherokee reservation. It's just really fascinating. But I do have family stories of where people didn't know what age they were, because there were no records, so you only know what other people have told you. And he served in the army, and eventually settles down in Madison, Wisconsin. And the pieces are all made out of costume jewelry that he has accumulated, to create these. So, we do have chains, and we have earrings, and all kinds of things, nothing precious, like jewelry that someone wore one or two times and discarded. He creates into these beautiful objects. So fascinating story with this guy.
Oh, wow. I know we talked about it, but then there's always something amazing that you share here, and thank you so much, Lucreza and Dimitri.
Before you move on, there's just another
Yeah.
comment I wanted to make about this piece. And we
Yeah.
talked about sort of like the mind's natural tendency to do this. But when I look at this and I kind of fuzz up my eyes, I see a face in there, almost like
Oh.
a winking face. The term, the technical term is pareidolia. I'll put that in the chat. But that's sort of what I what I see when I look at this. And I don't know if it's deliberate. I think anytime that you do things in a somewhat symmetrical way, you have that tendency to in your own mind create a face that doesn't really exist there. But I find that fun to look at stuff like that.
Charlie, I want to add
Actually,
to that also. Yes, go ahead, Dimitri.
no. Go add your part.
Okay. And so I want to add to that too, because as I was listening to the song pairing about a sparrow, because my mind started to think about birds, right? Bird seeds and things like that. And I started to think about looking at it from a bird's eye view. And in that one, I could then start to see neighborhoods and things like that, kind of like a topography kind of thing. So that was, I think it's kind of nice to experiment with our visions, I guess, when we look at art. I like it.
Yeah, it's such a great thing is that, when you're looking at abstract art, your mind can go wherever you want, you know? I mean,
Right.
Leonardo da Vinci, not a bad artist himself, said that he used to look at a wall and he would see, if he stared at a wall long enough, that he was able to see patterns or people or action or animals, you know? And so it's the same thing that I think that you know, when I was a kid, I used to do that. I'd look at our curtains and I'd see faces, you know, in the curtains. I think that, you know, that a lot of people tend to do that. So it's a nice thing to do with the abstract art.
Yeah.
So I love that your mind went towards the connection between Sparrow and you know, the bird's eye view. It's a great connection.
Thanks, Robbie. The next piece is this one, and so let's listen to this song.
Sitting here all by myself, trying to be everybody else. Can't you see? Hey, I gotta be me. Ain't nobody just like this. I gotta be me.
Yeah, so it's this piece and this music just go hand in hand with me for me, and I think we'll kind of hear about the art and make the connection even further. And I think you know, Odetta being such an important folk musician that, you know, that was named the voice of the civil rights movement. You know who gave her that name actually is Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was asked, you know, what music do you listen to, and she said Odetta's music, and so that was that title was given to her. Although that was sort of her life. She was an opera singer. I mean, what has she not done? But she, the song got, you know, I gotta be me. Reminds me of so much of what this artist is trying to communicate with this piece. And again, it's Dimitri and Lucreza that are going to help us think even more about this piece.
Can we see the like zoomed out version so we can see the totality of the piece? Yeah, because I just think it's just a really incredible you know, piece to see the entirety of it. And you know, this is Gregory Warmack, who later dubbed himself as Mr. Imagination or Mr. I for short later. And Lucreza, I would have steal your thunder around it, but I'm just because I know you probably have some stories to go along with his work as well, but I'm really drawn to his work. It's one of my favorite in this collection that we're going to be showing. He's a native of Chicago, and due to gun violence, ended up having going into a coma. And when he wakes up from this coma, um, I guess I should kind of backtrack. He was out. He ever since the age of 7 was making art objects out of found items. He was making art out of wood that he would find on the street, stones that he would paint. You know, just whatever he could get his hands on. But after this coma, he really starts to have these visions, and I think that's a theme that, you know, is throughout of most of the African American folk artists that we're going to look at, is that some trauma happens in their life, and from that trauma they start to see these visions of God or these higher ways of being. And so for Womack, or Mr. Imagination, it was looking at himself in the mirror after his coma and getting visions of himself in royal regalia, with crowns on his head. And so these things start to find their way into his artwork. So a lot of these could, I guess, kind of be self-portraits, or capturing the people around him within the neighborhood. And yet he just finds discarded materials such as these bottle caps and wood and things in Chicago. Like I usually think of folk artists as being in the deep South or somewhere in the countryside, but he is in the South Side of Chicago. Do you want to, Lucreza, I know you have things to add.
No, go. I mean, you're doing great. Yeah, that was to me the fascinating part is, the fact that he had gone into this coma, and when he came out, he began to see these visions. And, he described it much as a lot of them do, as it being a very peaceful kind of thing. And he felt as though he was traveling through history and looking at ancient civilizations as well. And so he himself said, if you look at my work, it has the feeling of being both ancient and timeless. And so I thought that was really interesting. And going along with what you were saying earlier, Dimitri, most definitely self-portrait. But in all of that, it also kind of resembles the First Nations totem poles, which are said to represent and commemorate ancestry and histories, and their own people and their events. And so when I see that, I kind of get that same feeling from it, as though not only is he describing himself or doing a self-portrait, but he's pulling in all of that ancient history that he speaks about seeing in his visions. And so it becomes almost to me like a family tree, because even when you look down at the bottom part of the assemblage, you see people, and to me it's kind of like that's the root system, that's where it all began, and it comes up through time, and finally he's able to see himself in the context of that history and that lineage. So for me it's a very powerful piece.
I just wanted to mention, I love the fact that the base is all out of bottle caps, and I don't know how many of the people listening in are familiar with Ella Natui, who is a Ghanaian artist. And what he does is, he does it's the same idea. He has like this whole factory of people collecting sort of like the tops of beer, like the metallic like paper that's around that, and he makes these. I'll put a link in the chat that shows an example of his work. I mean, his stuff is just really wonderful, and I think it comes from this folk tradition of using whatever you've got to be able to make the art, which is really wonderful. I did want to also just make one comment about that music. You've got that Odetta piece that you play. And we talked a little bit about this, that if anyone is familiar with Joan Armatrading, listen to that piece and you just really hear where she got so many of her chops from. If you had said to me, that's an early Joan Armatrading piece, I wouldn't have blinked an eye. It's a really great piece, and I love the pairing of this work of art with it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Dimitri, for putting the dimensions of the piece on this. The next piece is it's a powerful piece for me, and we'll talk a little bit about the music after we hear it.
Have a little song, won't take long. Sing it right once or twice. Oh, Lord and me, didn't I shake sugary?
You're on mute today. Uh-oh, I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear you.
Yes, I was on mute. Thanks, Dimitri. As usual, I'm on mute. And I was going to mention that this is a cover of Elizabeth Cotton's Cotton's music. And a little bit about Elizabeth Cotton. She is by far one of the most influential guitarists. She's a left-handed guitarist that uses a right-hand guitar, and she also plays the banjo. But she did not get, I guess I don't want to use the word discovered, but she didn't really get known, become a known artist until she started working as a housekeeping person in the Seeger family. And her first song, which gets covered so much, was Freight Train. And this song is covered by a newer folk artist, a contemporary folk artist. Sorry, drawing blank on the name right now. I have it right there. Rhiannon Giddens.
Rhiannon Giddens.
Yeah, and she
of the
is
Carolina Chocolate Drops.
from the Carolina Chocolate Drops, and it's a cover from Elizabeth Cotton's song, and you know, the contemporary artist Rhiannon Giddens she went to Louisiana, started learning folk music and folk songs, and started to kind of create the tunes and kind of unearth a lot of the connection that folk music has to Black history and Black culture and all of that. And Shaking Sugary it's interesting. Shake Sugary is an interesting thing because the meaning, no one seems to know for sure. There's so many theories out there about what it could actually mean, but definitely not. And then when you know, Elizabeth Cotton answers a question about it, she says, well, it was my great grandchild that just came up with my great grandchild that just started singing the first line, and we just started adding words. But it's about it's a happy kind of lullaby start, and you start hearing the words and it starts to get kind of sad, and it's about, you know, somebody losing all their possessions. So yeah, I kind of liked it because of how this piece, also I'll let Lucreza cover this one, makes me feel.
Okay. I'm doing this one by myself, but okay. So
I'm with you.
Oh no, Dimitri's with you.
perfect. Perfect. Okay, so this is a piece by Mary Proctor, who began calling herself Missionary Mary. So again, like, you know, Dimitri pointed out at the very beginning of this, her artistry was born out of tragic situations. And so she began actually painting in the mid 1990s after a house fire killed her grandmother, her aunt, and an uncle. And her husband found her after all of that happened beneath a tree, just inconsolable because all of this had happened. And she was watching the rescue crew actually shoveling the bones of her relatives from the ash. And so for the next 30 days, she began fasting and praying and, you know, pleading to God on how to move forward through this tragedy. And so on the 30th day of fasting, she heard the words, "Paint the way." And that was the entryway into her artistry. So she took 3 doors and painted portraits of each of her lost family members, because she believed that she was doing this under the instruction of Almighty God. And so that in itself, my gosh. So anyway, she kind of continued on with the painting of doors, and so this is one of them. For me, this is multi-layered. I mean, we know that, you know, if we could do a little bit of a close-up, that it's primarily constructed of empty packets of Equal, which is a sugar substitute. Now, what I found really interesting was because the background is this almost electric pink to me, it reminds me of cotton candy, which is, of course, you know, the antithesis of this Equal. And we know from the writing on the actual door that when she was creating this, she was saying that she wanted to, I think her granddaughter, if we could kind of take the picture up a little bit, her granddaughter had asked her what it was that she wanted in life, and she said she just wanted to be treated equal. And so we understand that to be, you know, something that all Black people at that time, as well as now, we say we just want equality. We just want equality for our lives. And so we know that that's, you know, that's what she was had in mind when she was using the equal, but it also made me think about how in the African American culture there are so many people who have what we call in our community sugar, which is sugar diabetes. And so to be thinking of that and thinking about how many people in the community have been plagued with that and how they use things like, equal and other sugar substitutes kind of puts another dimension on it for me. So I just thought it was really interesting how you could look at, it in so many different ways. Dimitri?
I mean, I don't have very much to add except for, just kind of her story. You know, I, Luke Carissa was talking about the tragedy that happened and then this calling that she got from God. So she created these three door panels. It's not what we're seeing right now, and says that a calling from God also had her stick them outside. And within 2 weeks, this curator, Trisha Collins, happens by and said, "Your folk art is beautiful. I'll pay you 5,000 for it." So it's just kind of wild. And actually, Missionary Mary still has her shop and her studio in Tallahassee, Florida. She just started into this art in the mid 1990s, so she's very much still around and doing this art practice and has work in all kinds of museums and collections, which is really, really interesting. But Laquitisa thoroughly covered the whole story of this piece.
Thank you both. Oh man, thank you both so much. Yeah, and I think the connection between folk music and folk art is what what really resonates with me, is kind of that comes from a place of sometimes sadness, sometimes resilience and hope, and a combination of those, and we find that in the art and also in the music. All right. Okay.
Oh, bo, 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 bo. Band. Already join the band. Hey, come along, come join the band. Already join the band. My big bull rat, come join the band. Oh, bo, 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 bo. Band. Oh, bo, 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 bo. Band. Already join the band. Hey, run along, come join the band. Already join the band. Everybody come along, come join.
I really like this one because, one, for the simple fact that he has an instrument already. He has a banjo, and they need a banjo, right? That they're using their voice, and they're doing call and response, which actually started in the fields. The call and response had a very practical purpose and function. And then, now we see it in jazz, we see it in so much kind of music. And in that call and response you just heard, also, they're calling him to join the band. I mean, he already has a banjo, so why not join the band? That's what reminded me of that. And also, I think this is an important piece because of the banjo, which, when we think of the banjo, we don't always think of African Americans or Black people, but really when it's a very complex history. The history of the banjo is complex because history is normally loyal to who writes it, right? So it had to be researched and reclaimed, and after so much evidence that we know now that it came from, what we have always known, but now it's in the books, is that the banjo came from West Africa, and it has its roots in West Africa. And it used to be the drum part that you see on a banjo used to be made out of stretched skin or stretched hide. And so just seeing that, and also how eventually we see less and less Black folks playing the banjo. I just like the piece. I just like the art with this, and that folk quality of the music. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's
Charlie.
yeah, it's really wonderful. Well, it's funny, you talk about the roots of the banjo in coming from Africa. And so, we just heard Rhiannon Giddens, and, she plays in the Carolina Chocolate Drops.
Right.
And that music that they're playing, they have a banjo, which they use. First of all, I highly recommend seeing them. They're just so much fun in so
You've seen them live, Charlie?
Oh yeah, they're great.
Oh man.
They're not good, they're great. And it's just an education to watch them play all these different instruments and the stories they tell about the songs. It's really great. And of course they use the banjo quite a lot in their music. And there's a documentary that has oh yeah, I'll put the name in the chat in just a minute. There's a great documentary by a famous, believe it or not, jazz banjo player named Bela Fleck, where he goes to Africa and starts to play with a lot of them. It's really fascinating. But if we can just go back to the whole view of the painting. So, I really love this painting for a number of reasons. For one thing, I play guitar, so for me, any art that has some sort of instrumentalist in it, I'm already paying attention. You already got me, And I also love the fact that it almost looks like an old baseball player or something like that, the kind of hats that they used to wear. So I love how my mind goes sort of in different directions. But, this is Jimmy Lee Sudduth, and he's a really interesting artist who started painting with, again, this is a common theme with all the artists that we've talked about, but he uses the materials around his house. And one of the things that he would do is that he would start making paintings out of mud. But then what happened was that he would find that it would rain, gone. So he started finding materials that would make the works last longer. So he started making what he called sweet mud. And so he would add things like honey or Coca-Cola to give more sort of heft and more lasting power to his works. I have a partial list of the materials that he's used in his work. It's, give me just a minute here, but I mean, it's just a hilarious list of ingredients. Flour, coffee grounds, instant coffee, dye wrung from sodden red crepe paper, ground brick, ground charcoal, colored chalk, crushed coal, turnip greens, flower petals, pokeweed berries, ivy soot, axle grease, etc., etc. I mean, there's another 30 things on the list of things. Of course, the one problem with using these sort of sweet materials, as anyone who's put something sweet in their house, mice really like these materials. So that what would happen is very often he would create some work, the next day go down and there would be some fat mouse with a big smile on his face going, I'll pay you $2,000 for that work, or whatever I didn't need, I'll take home. I mean, that's the one problem with it, is that you had that. But he's really interesting. The other interesting thing about him, and we have an artist right now at MOAD who is uses the same technique, which is to say that he always used his finger instead of a paintbrush. One of the things he would say is that paintbrushes run out, they dry up, they fall apart. My finger doesn't. And then he has some quote, "When I die, the brush dies." So it's just a lovely story about how he does his work, and these the kind of images that he creates.
Oh my goodness, I like that quote a lot. Yeah,
it's really, it says a lot in a little.
It does, and I'm glad that you mentioned Boafo's work, kind of reminding you of Boafo's work, and that's definitely, it definitely reminds you of that too.
Yeah, well worth seeing the exhibit too. So it's a plug for MOAD at the same time. It's really some great portraits.
Yes, come over and see the work. And also, so the sugar connection from the last piece, and I think that's why you asked me to put those two together also, right? Because of the equal piece and moving on to the sugar being used on this piece. So I like that connection as well. Two different interpretations, two different uses of sugar package and then the sugar. Yeah. This next piece, oh man, it's my favorite. Okay, let's listen to the music.
cannot tell how much I owe. King Jesus died on Calvary. Oh, yes, he died for you and me. I've often wondered if I tried, I cannot tell how much I owe, for love divine.
Yeah, I chose this music for this because first of all, I could not have chosen something else considering that Mary T. Smith was the artist, and she, she had a tough start. Mary Tillman Smith had a tough start to her life. But all throughout her artistic, and we'll talk a little bit about her and her art just in a moment. But why I put these two together is all throughout her art, she really loved Jesus Christ, and she really connected with Jesus Christ, and she wanted to show her connection to Jesus. And what was interesting is when I first saw it, and how the Smithsonian has labeled this, is this black and red male figure with upraised arms. When I first saw this, I did not see Jesus at all. I mean, that wasn't what came to my mind. And as I started kind of looking at the drips on the side of the painting is when I thought, oh, okay. Then reading about her made me realize that this could not have been anybody else except the image of Jesus, and her version of Jesus, or the crucifixion. And so I thought that song went really well with this piece.
Yeah, she's another interesting person. I think one of the connections that we see with a lot of the folk artists is the connection between religion and their art, and how they're bringing that in various forms. And I think this is a perfect example. She often will have people raising their arms as a sense of joy or enlightenment or happiness. And she typically will use people in her family as subjects for her work. And then she has very, very basic color scheme. She really likes like a 3-tone panel or a 4-tone panel in her work. And then you'll see these little dots. I don't know if you can get a close up on that, but if you look along along the sides of the arms, you see a lot of these dots kind of thing. And, as you said, she had a really, really difficult life. For one thing, she had hearing loss as a child. And, as if anyone knows someone or has hearing loss, if you know someone like that, you know how isolating that can be. And early on as a child, she would, often be playing alone because she had, what her sisters called a weird voice, because, they can't really hear the sounds of the words as well. And so she was often not invited to play. And so what would she do? I mean, she would just sit around in the dirt, drawing in the dirt. And so that's really how her, her sense of self, her sense of expression, came through. So it's another example of someone using something that might have held someone back in one way or another, but then they use it to find a way of expression, and it becomes a very positive thing for them.
And Charlie, I wanted to also add how she found this material. Also, this is after she had her first child, and it was kind of set aside from a construction site, and she started at a dumpster, and she started taking one thing after another and after another, and started using these pieces. And this is corrugated metal, and I've seen it mentioned somewhere. I can't help but connect Basquiat's style with this one. I saw it mentioned somewhere, and it clicked right away that
yeah, he's mentioned her as an inspiration.
There we go. Yeah. So I think just found objects is also something that we find that a lot of folk artists use. So yeah, I just really, really like her story. Like it, and also it's heartbreaking in some ways.
Yeah, it's a really joyful piece when you look at it. I mean, think of those
Yeah.
colors. The colors are really joyful. It's just that body language that's being expressed there. It
Right.
makes me smile when I look at this, and so I really like this work. Do you want to tell that story about her when she was the wife of a sharecropper? Do you know that
Oh,
story?
yeah. I no. Could you actually?
Oh, well,
You're a better
so
storyteller than
so
me.
she had one bad marriage, which she
Yeah.
got married when she was fairly young, and then that ended. And then she got married to a sharecropper. She was a very intelligent woman, would keep meticulous books about how much money was spent and how much came in. And at the end of the year, and this is a classic story, the sharecropper would give them 10% of really what they should owe. And she's like, no, I don't think so. These are the proper numbers. And she confronts the sharecropper, the owner of, I'm sorry, not the sharecropper, the owner of the property. And of course, his response is to tell her husband, you got to get rid of this woman, and basically provides another wife for her. And she just is absolutely disgusted, throws up her hands, and then, ended up never getting married again, being very, very independent, and sort of learning, unfortunately, where she was seen in society as her place in society, it's a sad and yet also empowering story, of someone who made the most of a bad situation.
Yeah, that's that was an interesting piece when I read about that, and yeah, whew, the lives of these artists. And this next piece.
Now, masters of war, you build all the big guns, you build a big plane, and you build a big bomb. You hide behind walls, and you hide behind death.
Yeah, what did you think of that pairing?
A perfect pairing, because this piece, it's called Peace with Honor, and was inspired by, of all people, Richard Nixon, when he was, talking about, leaving the Vietnam War with peace with honor. And of course, he felt that, it was that, tricky Dick, you can't trust him. So, if you go back and show the full piece here, you have these two figures who are supposedly agreeing to something, and yet both of them are holding weapons behind their back. And of course, who are their little consultants? You've got these two little red devils behind them. So it's just this, sense of betrayal on in this case, the American people, for because the words were hollow on the part of Nixon. So, it's a very political piece. Yeah. Do you have other thoughts about it today?
Yeah, this is the artist that started with the elephant, right?
Right.
Charlie?
Yes.
Yeah, so he didn't realize that he was an artist, or the artist of this form, until he made an elephant to his late wife. He made an elephant, and she thought it was amazing. And it was a wood carved elephant that he made for her. Then he started, with her encouragement, of course, he started making these relief pieces, and this became kind of his thing, his artwork. And so, yeah, I thought that was a sweet piece, a sweet story to tell about his start of working with wood.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? We have sort of a quiet audience today. I don't know. Did everyone have too much turkey for Thanksgiving? Because we're not getting a lot of comments today. I don't know. Maybe they're all out Christmas shopping. I don't know.
Are you all there? But yeah. So the There we go. Now they're coming. Thanks, Janet. All right. So, all right. Let's look at this.
Black girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pond, oh, where the sun never shine. I wish you would all night through. Black girl, where will you go?
I didn't mean
This
to
is-
make people feel guilty about not writing in, so it's okay.
You know, this piece, this song and this piece, and this is Lead Belly, because if we talk about folk art, Black folk art and Black folk music, we have to talk about Lead Belly, who we know him as a blues singer, but his early start was in folk music. He would sing folk music, and this is his version of. And this is how I feel like the conversation might be going with these two subjects, right? Like he's like, where have you been? I've been looking for you. I'm here just, waiting for you. And where have you been with your umbrella? I don't know. I mean, that's a conversation. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's kind of what they're saying. Probably more colorful words than that. But yeah, that's what I'm imagining the conversation here with Bill Traylor's painting. Yeah.
I kind of want to kick out. Bill Traylor is my favorite, if we're gonna call them folk artists of all time. And I think also just kind of with this collection of the work that you've put together today, he occupies this very different time period, a very early time period. As I always do, I just have to start off with the artist's own story to kind of talk about the work, so that there's a little more context. And so Bill Traylor was actually born in 1853 in Alabama. So he was born onto a plantation. He was born enslaved. And after there's a whole story about that where the family moved the family that owned his family, I gotta come up with another word, that enslaved their family, I guess, or put them into service, decided to move them because they didn't really trust Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation would come true. And of course, in Alabama, it took a couple years after the Emancipation Proclamation for them to truly be free. But kind of in that process, the Traylor family, ended up remaining laborers on that family's plantation. Anyway, he eventually moves to Montgomery, Alabama, where he starts picking up art. And one of the things I love about Bill Traylor is that the work is mostly done on cardboard, things that he's just found discarded throughout his neighborhood. So, the insides of, we had one at MOAD during the Studio Museum exhibition. And I think you really have to see them and kind of see the backside and see it's like a cereal box or like the box that gum came in, or signs that were out in the neighborhood. And he paints on the backside of them, initially starting off with pencil and colored pencil, and then moving into paint and charcoal. This painting right here is from 1939. It's the year just before a white artist collective called the New South installed his work in an exhibition in Montgomery. And kind of reading things about Bill Traylor, talking about his work, he was really thinking about the condition of being a Black man in the South, in Alabama. And so there's all kinds of coded, he was not able to really just come straight out like artists of the 1960s or later were able to be like, there's racism, it's everywhere, because, just the act of being an artist was something that was not usual. And as a Black illiterate man, he wasn't really able to express these ideas. So there's a lot of coded language in his painting, and it just really fascinates me. He's also this, after he died, he became celebrated as an accidental modernist. He's got all these these somber silhouettes of people that really, they say, compresses a universal volume and feeling into the flattest of shapes. Um, it's just phenomenal, untrained, unschooled artist. Um, and yeah, I hope I didn't go too deep with it. I'm not talking about this piece. I'm just talking about the artist here.
That is
I think
awesome. Thank you so much,
Lucarisa has it
Dimitri.
also.
Yeah.
Look, Lucarisa was on this with me, right? No, you weren't? Oh,
Well,
I
no,
thought you
no,
were
no.
going to talk about the piece.
No, I was, but you were doing so well. I was like fascinated. Please, please.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk, I didn't talk specifically about this piece and its meaning. I'm just obsessed with Bill Traylor.
Okay. Well, I mean, so really, I had no more to say about it. I'm just fascinated by the fact that, he, definitely was an artist that was self-taught, the fact that he was illiterate all of his life, and that, as you were saying, what kind of makes him different from the others is the fact that literally his pieces were, based on everyday scenes that he would see. So, as you were saying today, perhaps this is a piece where he's, talking to his woman, and he's like, where you been? Because I've been waiting and you ain't been around, and here I am, and also what I find really interesting though is about the gentleman, and he is on crutches, which at that time there were so many African American men that had disabling things like this from having been enslaved and having various parts of their bodies maimed and removed because of being in the fields and having the overseers to use their whips to whip them. You had men who were trying to escape from being enslaved, and they had body parts chopped off to keep them from running. So you have all of this kind of going on, and the emotions of the piece is like, here I am, I'm disabled, and woman, where you been? you know? Kind of brings it really home, and makes it really an emotional piece. Really an emotional piece.
Yeah, I also love. I gotta go back to the Lead Belly because y'all know I love Lead Belly. But yeah, but I mean, I think I never knew that Lead Belly song until Nirvana. Kurt Cobain covered it in 1993 for MTV Live, and so if that was not your generation, your music that you were listening to at the time, I encourage folks to go to YouTube to look up Nirvana at MTV Unplugged in 1993. I remember I was a freshman in high school when that came out. And, because it was just really, it was amazing to see that. And then that really, we had the folk music revival of the 60s. And I think that, at least for my generation, kind of like sparked the folk music and blues music revival of the 1990s.
Right. I also wanted to say there was one thing that was said about his work and it's that it remains the only substantial surviving body of drawings and paintings by a man born into the then dying system of American slavery. And I just thought, wow, that's a mouthful right there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Whew. Wow. Okay. So I think we can do a whole discussion on Bill Taylor. I think next time maybe we should do that. I love that. Thank you for that. And the next one is yours also. But I'd like to let's listen to the music first.
I'm a total old shaker from a navel on down, I'm satisfied. It's gonna bring you back, I'm satisfied. Tickle too, old enough to marry you, I'm satisfied. It's gonna bring you back.
I mean, Need I Say More? It's Mississippi John Hurt. It's a little bluesy, but I really like the music. And I think I like these two folks as they look like they're happy and satisfied. So I'll just go ahead and.
Lucretia, so you kicked this one off.
Oh, I was so patiently waiting for you. So, ooh, this is a lot. This one, this, ooh, okay. So the artist is Bessie Harvey. Bessie Harvey is religious to an extreme. I mean, like over and beyond. So let me start off by saying when I first saw this piece, I thought, okay, this is about, roots and root working and maybe, comes from, West Africa and all of that, right? And then I started reading about her. So I want to read a little something really quickly. As a creator of visionary art, she often claims that God is the main source for her work, even to the extent that he is working through her. I'm really not the artist, she says. God is the artist in my work, in nature and in insects. They shape my work for me because they belong to God and I belong to God and all things belong to God because it's in his word that all things are made to him and without him there's not anything made. So God allowed her to see these forms within the wood that she worked with, and with his help, she could give physical shape to the spiritual presences within the tree roots and the limbs and the pieces of driftwood. And her interest in nature was due in part to her belief that she could access or see the spirit of her ancestors within trees. And so that's just a little bit. I mean, everything for her was about God speaking through her. So for me, then can we see the totality of the piece? For me, that put a totally different spin on it. And suddenly I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is Adam and Eve. This is her vision of Adam and Eve. Why that came, just by reading how much she was into God, and then also bringing in that ancestral part of it, because she was seeing the spirit of her people in this in the pieces that she would create. So she came from, unsurprisingly, from a trauma driven childhood where she was a child of 10 children. Her mom was an alcoholic. Her father died when she was really young. She didn't have any guidance. And so consequently, that's why she turned to God so fervently and began to allow him to just lead and guide her in this whole thing. She herself, I believe, had 11 kids. And so she started making art kind of to help her to be able to support these 11 children. I mean, can you imagine 11 kids? I mean, maybe in that day and age, it wasn't really that surprising, but I'm thinking 11 kids, my goodness. And then 11 kids by yourself. She was on welfare, but she needed to do something. And so that is why she started doing the art. Then it also became a way for her to unload her burdens, because she would use these things to talk to them, to use them as her way of reaching God. And so she would pour out her heart about her situation to these dolls that she was creating. And so, it's just a multi-layer of things with this artist. But like I said, I was just completely fascinated by how religious she was and how everything she did came from the fact that she heard God speaking through her to create these things. And then she talks about, because God is love, whenever anything comes against her, she would replace it with love. And so she would use these things, actually her art, as a way of showing love to others, and so she would freely hand out her art without a problem because she felt like she was actually sharing the love of God with her art. So, Dimitri.
Yeah, someone just asked, I think is that Pamela, about the difference between folk art and outsider art. They're kind of the same, um, in lots of ways, but outsider art um, is not is an artist that's not trained. And I think the distinguishing factor, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but usually that's also why I say like folk art. I usually associate with pastoral environments, not the urban environment. Um, but feel free to look that up because this is not my area of expertise at all. Yeah, but I think what I wanted to go back to is also the fact that just to kind of elucidate a little bit of her history, because I sent a link, put a link into the chat, because just it's her own words of her speaking. And yes, she is like, I mean, deeply, deeply religious in this very, very intense way. But yeah, she talks about losing her father at a very young age, and being stuck with her mother, who was an alcoholic. And so then this is why she would go off and create her own little, you know, friends to play with and to talk to. Um, so interesting. And I did get a chance to see these at a museum in New Orleans, and they're just really, really incredible pieces, super intricate. And sometimes she has little worlds inside of the worlds that she creates. Um, yeah, and we already talked about Mississippi John Hurt, so I won't go deeply into that.
And that site that you
We
put
did.
up, that Souls Grown Deep, is a great site. Several of the artists that we've shown today have their oral histories on that site. So it's a great site to look at. But I also wanted to mention that Joan Foster has two comments. She says it's interesting in that the belief that wood is life itself is found in several New Guinea cultures as well. And then she follows it up with the idea that, a tree can bend in the wind, helpful if you are a slave. And then, yeah, so some interesting.
That's interesting that she says that, because Bessie also said that one of her motivations also for making her art was to liberate spirits and souls that she believed was captured in the branches of trees. She said, "I have a feeling for Africa. I see African people in the trees and in the roots. I talk to the trees. There's souls in the trees and in the branches and the roots, and I freeze them."
Ooh. Oh, wow. I definitely went to school today. I went to church and school. Thank you so much. And that comment also reminds me of the color of our skin, and the connection that it has with trees and leaves and all those. And it just thank you for that comment. This last piece, because Christmas is coming for those who celebrate, and so here we go.
Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? Now I'm gonna send the one by one for the little bit baby, wrapped in swaddling clothing, laid in a hollow manger, son of the Virgin Mary, born of Bethlehem. Children, go where I send.
So Odetta, we spoke about Odetta earlier, and this song is about Christmas. She has a whole album, by the way, a Christmas album, and I'm not a big fan of Christmas music, but boy, I can listen to this every day. I can listen to that album, and we'll send you, if you participated today, we'll send you the links to all the music and the art, so you can further explore this work. But I do want to say something about this, and I first when I saw it, I really didn't make the connection of 3 wise men and a goat. And for those of you who, those who may not know the story, is the 3 wise men, and I might be butchering this, were led by a star to go see Jesus in the manger in Bethlehem, and they bore gifts with them, and it just reminded me of, you know, a goat leading these people, although that we know it's the star that led them there, but the goat's in the front, and the song just connected with that for me. Anybody wants to comment or talk about this piece by David Butler?
Well, one of the things I think about in photography is, I think about how a single image is, either great or not so great. But then when you have like a series of images that show the same theme repetitively, for me, it makes it much, much more interesting. And so I love that idea of this repetition of form and image in this piece. And it immediately captures my eye. And so I think it's a great piece. And then, of course, the use of the negative space is really interesting as well. If anyone doesn't understand what I mean by negative space, here's your hand, right? The fingers are the positive space. Anything behind it is the negative space. So, I just really like that idea.
Can you believe it's metal? I mean, that's the part that I didn't, at first I really didn't think that was metal. And we have more pieces for our part 2. And when we do that, we will announce it for sure. But I definitely didn't realize that it was metal, and being able to carve and create that contrast between the background. And I just absolutely admire the repetition with the carving. And so, yeah, how big is it? I don't have the measurement. You know what? Next time I'm going to be sure to include the sizes. Rodney, you've told me to do that before. I keep forgetting. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is our last piece, and I want to say thank you so much for everyone that joined us today. There are many ways of getting involved at Mawad, and if you're in the Bay Area, come see us. Text to donate, to support us. Any amount is welcome and appreciated, and allows us to do these types of free programming. And then, of course, you can become a member of the museum and reap the benefits. And thanks again, and we'll be here next month, and we'll see you next month. Next month, it will be on a Monday, because we'll also be celebrating MLK Day with you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dimitri, Lucarissa, and Charlie. I learned so much today.